Welcome to the Divine Lifestyles Podcast. I'm your host, Tara Migalski. Together with my guest experts, I cover topics ranging from cutting-edge healing modalities to hormonal harmony, to nutrition and plant medicine, to mindfulness and spirituality. My goal is to educate and inspire so you can create your own divine lifestyle. It's time to dive inward, rewire your brain, and heal from the inside out. Welcome to the Divine Lifestyles Podcast. I am your host, Tara Migalski, and today I am joined by Jules Schroeder, founder of Unconventional Life. She is ranked by Inc. magazine as one of the top 27 women entrepreneurs changing the world, and I can vouch for that. She is also a musician and founder of the Unconventional Life, a bucket list events company and top-ranked podcast for entrepreneurs that has reached millions of people in over 75 different countries. She features stories of people following non-traditional paths. She is also a real estate investor, speaker, best-selling author, high-level business consultant and coach, and she's one of my business mentors. Jules, thank you so much for being here today. It's such an honor to have you. You are teaching transformation at scale, and I just want everyone in the world to know about you.
Tara, thank you so much for having me. Hi, everyone. So good to be on the show. You know, it's wild when you hear the introductions, you're like, yeah, what a journey, right? It's been. And I know you and I were talking before we got on about, just since we first met and how quickly life can change and keep evolving. So good to be here.
Yes, Jules and I met actually in 2019 in Boulder, Colorado at the Higher Purpose Project. And boy, have I been able to witness your growth. So that's why I wanted you here today. Tell us, we'll dive more into the amazing transformation that you've created in your life. But tell us who you are. Like, who were you, Jules, before you became an entrepreneur?
Yeah, well, I grew up as the oldest of five to a dad who was a Puerto Rican immigrant. He was one of four. His dad passed away when he was 18. There were six of them in a Miami high rise. And so he was very much making money as he worked his way up. We moved from Florida to Connecticut, and it was something, if you wanted anything, you had to work for it. So I had three jobs in high school, rocked out the bag and groceries, Maggie Moo's ice cream stand, and any odd jobs that I could have. And what I learned from my dad as he was working in Wall Street was very much this mentality. He climbed his way up the corporate ladder of, instead of seeing what's right with something, looking at where the opportunities are or what's missing. And as a 16-year-old, it was really annoying because I'd be like, Dad, I've got all these ideas. And he's like, did you think about this? Did you think about that? And instead, he would get me to really, I think, develop that entrepreneurial mindset. And such that when, I turned 18, I moved to Colorado, I went to school out here. I started my first six-figure company, which was an internship, going around knocking on doors to run a house painting business. And there was a clipboard that ran around in my economics class, want to make a bunch of money? And I was like, yes, I do. My dad used to say there's no freedom without economic freedom. And I was like, I'm going to be free. And so I would get, perfected the art of random homeowners. Hi, I noticed you should have a free estimate, and getting invited in. And I built, a six-figure company within just a couple of months. And it was amazing to see the results. But producing was another thing. I was not a painter. I oversprayed cars and really got good at conflict resolution quickly and all those other sides of business. But the foundation of it, of just wanting to make something of myself was really that core theme. I had this internal knowing that there was more inside of me, but my external reality didn't match it yet. And that is something that I feel like had been a theme at a young age, and really a theme in my work now, as I find I'm a magnet for people in transition. And often when they are ready to go to their next level in life or business or their career, I'm like the soul doula that helps birth and assist, what they want to create rapidly into getting into the world. And it's really a gift to be able to do that. But I also know, with that, there's been all the ups and downs, which I'm sure we can kind of dive into, but just to stand for people getting to include all parts of themselves in whatever conversation. And music, as you mentioned in the introduction, has also been a theme. I was on American Idol when I was 16 and thought I wanted to go be a rock star. And I smoked cigarettes at the time. I was such a rebel back then. I advanced it to 200 people, and I got so nervous on one of the rounds. I think I chain smoked like a half a pack of cigarettes. that night, and I walked in the next day, lost my voice. It was like worst case scenario. And they were like, "Do you smoke?" And I was like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Come back when you don't smoke anymore." So they like denied me advancing because it was really bad for like that sweetheart, 16-year-old image, I guess. So yeah, but I thought originally I was gonna, go into music. And my dad, because of the mentality he had, he worked so hard, and he was like, unless you're 100% certain of what you want to do in life, then, music, only the top 1% make it, and it's such a risk. I really, got into my head that I didn't have confidence that I have now. And so that's why I got really good at business. And then 9 years later, I eventually got my first music album, and, life has evolved the way that it has, but it's definitely been a unique path for sure.
So tell us about that pivotal moment in your life that changed, the trajectory of your path. I know you had a near-death experience.
Yeah, it was 2015, the wakeboarding accident. And, the year prior, like I had shared, I ran my first six-figure company at 18, seven-figure company at 22. And then by the time I was 24, I had a business partner embezzle a bunch of money. We had a book publishing company at the time, went in hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of debt. And this was the first time that I really had to ask myself, what does success mean, and what does it mean to me? And from the outside, I had the money, I had the relationships, I was like rubbing noses with all these fancy authors in the health and wellness space. And like people would spend $1,000 at dinner. And I was like 23, 24. And I thought I was like balling out. I'm like, this is as good as it gets. It's everything I want. But there was always this thing that was missing. And I think the irony was is that embezzlement, which was a year prior to the near death experience, it's almost like it came in like life does at times and started to tear down all of my constructs of what I thought success was, or I thought was the path to get me to where I needed to go. And lo and behold, I had that accident where I was out with the guys in 2015, seeing who could get the most air, launched and caught an edge and face planted. And in that moment, I knew something wasn't terribly right, but it did a cross check, and my head and everything seemed to be attached. And I got off the boat about an hour later and just remember getting numb in my hands and fingers, and looked at a friend of mine, and I was like, something's not right. And my next memory was coming out of the MRI in the hospital, being approached by this white figure, Six Black Shadow member conversation, and having this out of body moment that was, Jules, you have more work to do in the world. Do you want to do it? And they thought my neck was broken. They thought I might have been paralyzed. And I just remember saying yes, as long as I didn't come back as a vegetable. And then this next moment being zapped into my body, feeling this energy forge my neck back together and shoot down my spine. And when I woke up, it was like everything shifted. It was very much what felt like the end of life being done by me and life coming through. And I didn't even know what I didn't even know at the time of what that meant. I mean, 3 weeks later, I'm in the neck brace, and this woman calls from the United Nations, and she's like, "You want to be a global ambassador for education?" And I'm like, "It's not really the best time, kind of like almost died." And this voice is like, "Tell her you have this initiative to reimagine higher education." And I had no initiative. And before I could even stop myself, I was like, I've completely lost my mind. I got to get committed somewhere. I was telling her I had this thing called Create You to reimagine higher education. And I was invited to the UN weeks later. Forbes reaches out. I start the podcast. I start writing for them. And it all just kind of took off from there. But more than anything, I really find life has a way coming back to where I was that year prior of giving us these nudges and these course corrects. And my dad used to joke that I came out of the womb kicking and screaming, very stubborn. So for me, it takes a lot of these hard knocks to say, hey, it's actually in this direction. And so much of that has been pivotal. And, Unconventional Life, my company that got birthed out of that, and how I see, coach, and really, exist to the world today.
Wow. Gosh, it's so intense. And I love it.
Yeah.
I just want to talk a little bit more about, the NDE in the sense of like what you learned, what it is that you realize coming out of that experiencing, having, these council members, like you said. Would you call them your spirit guides? Um,
Yeah.
and like what it is that you got from that where you said, okay, I need to go this way.
Yeah, it's a great question. It fascinated me. I think for the first year after that accident, I didn't tell anybody about it. I was like, people are going to think I'm nuts. Like, the council, like, what's the council? Fortunately, there are conversations like this that we can have. And I actually started interviewing people on my podcast. And it turns out that the council is actually a very common experience with near death types of encounters. And for me, when I was there, it felt like the most love that I've ever been present to. I grew up Catholic and can't really say that I connected in that way to a higher power. And after that accident, for me, there was no doubt in my mind, like there was God as an experience. And having touched that amount of love and that space, it was kind of like a catch 22 because I was like, if this exists, this amount of love and connection, oneness, wholeness, why are we human in these bodies? And if that's an option on the menu, like, what is this whole human experience and life thing all about? And it created this duality in me that was really challenging to reconcile because from the outside, I was having all this external success that was happening. But from the inside, none of that external success like actually mattered or gave me that hit or that like dopamine hit as it did in the years prior of being ranked like by Inc. or having this success or that thing. It wasn't about me anymore. It felt like I became the instrument for the work I was being called to do. And so it really had me start to realize in a lot of the gifts of like, the human experience, the irony, right? We are wholeness, we are source, we are oneness in bodies. So we take oneness and we're now inherently separated. And a lot of the path I find in my path is to come in the remembering of our own oneness in our natural separation. So talk about holding those two and the reconciliation of that. And that's why I think the work that you're doing is so amazing. And podcasts like this are so important because we have to be able to hold both, but we are consciousness in body, right? We're not just consciousness, we are consciousness in body. And so the more that you learn to work with those two, which has been a lot of my work and a lot of the value I've seen, the more fun life gets when you know that the secret menu is available because you can work with the two in a harmony. But B, without that, I think those deeper questions around meaning and purpose and fulfillment don't really get addressed if you don't address those things within yourself first. And that's just my experience and the experience I've seen with so many others that I've come into contact with.
Yeah, so beautifully put. What do you find now that you've had this experience, right? Sometimes people have these great experiences, but it's the tangible tools that you practice on the daily, right? Can you share some of the tangible tools that you feel have guided you on your path to mastery?
Absolutely. I remember, the first time I read the book The Alchemist, which I'm sure maybe you've read, and I read it for 5 hours on a sailboat. I don't recommend that. I was totally seasick after, but I couldn't put the book down while I was on the boat. But it was just, and for those that haven't read it, this concept of these signals that guide us. And one thing I've gotten really clear on is that life is always conspiring in collaboration with you and for you. And oftentimes we perceive there's this gap of what you want, whether it's clients or money or a relationship. And so it occurs like this gap and this moving target. It seems like you can make progress in certain areas, but the gap just gets bigger. And what I've realized is that the more that you really follow your aliveness and your excitement, and I'll give you a specific tool in just a second, within that, there is no gap. You actually can have the experience of having all of the things that you want now, even though they haven't shown up in physical reality yet. And that process, like case in point, I've been really calling in, if you know me, like being a mom and getting married. And it felt like I could do all this business stuff and make millions of dollars and all these things. And then like the irony was I let it go and I've been so committed to the feeling of having it. And now like, yeah, my partner's come back and he's like, I'm ready, let's do it. And like we gave up on the relationship and didn't think it was possible. And now I'm like, oh my God, all the things I deeply wanted are showing up for me. And so one way, especially when I first got started, is I started playing this game of looking at my life and ranking on a 1 to 10 scale where maximum aliveness is. So a 10 being I looked at everything I was doing in my life, from answering emails or work or fitness routines or health or connection with partner or different things like that. And on a 1 to 10, I gave it like 10 being like, this is maximum, like, hell yeah, F yeah, kind of like potential. One being like flat, I got to stop right now. And it was just an audit to just really look at what is the relationship to my time and my energy. And if someone said, where's your aliveness? I was so in the weeds of it, I couldn't even track. It was like aliveness, energy. It was like not even, I was like in a survival default of I just had to hustle and work and get stuff done. And so that's the first step I would say, like, go ahead, take 5 minutes, brainstorm everything that you do and give your time to in your life. Give it a 1 to 10 on the scale. And then anything that is an 8 or above, just notice what percentage of your time goes to that. And I did an audit and I looked at anything 8 and above on my scale, like 10% of my time used to go there. And things that were like 4s and 5s and 6s, that was where like the bulk, like 80% of my time went. And my only like 11s were like CrossFit and music. And I spent like 3% of my time there. And it had me in that awareness look at, well, if I want more of something in my life, you got to give your energy to it. And where you put your attention is where you put your energy. And so that process of auditing was a huge thing. And the other thing I'll add to that is if it's not really a yes, then it's a no. And I think there's this default way of feeling like we should do things. A partner gives us an invitation, or a friend says, hey, you want to come over? We feel obligated to our power of our yes. But really, the power of our no is something that I think so many of us don't talk about. And the more I've said no to things that are 4s or 5s or 6s, the more I train my environment to give me opportunities, clients, invitations, relationships that are truly at that 8, 9, and a 10. But if we don't train our environment by using our no, then our environment always is going to give us more of the same. So you got to be willing to pattern interrupt and really stand for things that give you energy. And if you can't do a full audit of your life due to circumstance and things like that, great. Pick one thing in one area to play with and just start to track, what can I say that's not really at a 4 or 5 or 6, and how can I start to give my energy at a different scale, and watch how quickly the results start to show up in your favor.
Yeah, this past 2 years for me has been a major transformation of just where I will, things I used to say yes to or give to. And it's so true. I always say I get on the no train more often because that frees up my creative space to write, to have energy, to feed and nourish myself. I mean, it's just the basics, but just by not going and doing all these other things that I just don't need to be doing. You
Yeah.
know what phase I'm in. I'm in motherhood phase,
Yeah, totally.
birthing phase. But I need all that energy, right? I need all of that energy so I can channel it through. I've got an exciting offer for all of my listeners. The free Divine Daily Practices video series. Get simple practices to release anxious thoughts, sharpen your intuition, and rewire your nervous system in less than 10 minutes a day. Come on over to my website at divinelifestyles.com/divine daily practices. And over the next week, you'll receive a complimentary self-care system to drop into your authentic self and activate your divine intuitive wisdom. I hope you enjoy. So, talk to us a little bit about, because I know one of the things that drew me to working with you with business is so much so of how you are you're channeling what it is that needs to come through you. I just want to tell me how you discovered those gifts. I know you have some cool stories, but tell me a little bit about how you work now with people by channeling what needs to come through you.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I first started, my unconventional life, which turned into this bucket list events company, it was literally a dream where I had 30 entrepreneurs gathering, and Bali came out of my mouth in 2016, about a year after that near death experience. And was running a digital marketing agency at the time, was definitely not willing to be out there. I had no audience, no skills, total introvert. I was like, I definitely can't be the one. I was like, God, this can't be real. Like, you can't be asking me to step in this way. And I think that higher power, God, however you relate to it, has this way of selecting those of us that you're like, me, I'm way underqualified. You want to give me this vision? So I just want to first off set the context that whatever vision you have is uniquely yours and uniquely yours for a reason. And oftentimes we do have our fear or lack of proof or lack of evidence that wants to tell us otherwise. And then the external path to create it seems so big that we can't even allow ourselves to get in the game or get in the medium to get started. And so if there is something that's just been turning in and that's what's drawing you to Tara or drawing you to conversations like this, I just want to name that that voice is real and it is uniquely yours because it is uniquely yours. It's your unique edge that comes in collaboration with creating it. And I got my firsthand experience of that where I sat after a few weeks after that dream and it just nagged at me. And I was like, if nothing else, even if I don't want to do an event, which was only yoga teachers and stuffy conference rooms back then, I was like, I got to at least birth the baby. So I called a friend of mine and was able to create the first event in Bali. In 3 months, we sold it out, and it paved the way for this, international live events company that I created for many years. And it was the second event that we did in Italy that a woman actually was sharing her near death experience. And it was a very emotional moment. She actually had been dead for 90 minutes. It was like a medical, like, yeah, she had like a bionic heart, was all over CBS, like it was crazy. And I felt called to get up, and there was this song playing, Say Something, which some of you might know, like, Say Something, I'm giving up on you. And it was like this very, yeah, emotional song. And so I got up and I took the microphone and I started speaking, and I felt like this voice like came in and my eyes were closed, and it almost felt like I stepped out and something stepped away, and I got like I blacked out for a couple minutes, and I woke up and everyone was bawling. And my friend came up and was like, "You just did this most eloquent spoken word poem. Was that rehearsed?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And if I hadn't seen the video footage of it, I wouldn't have almost believed it. But it was this discovery of this gift that I had in me. And it was the first time I'd ever had the experience of allowing energy to move through me. And I don't hold it. Some people channel and they have someone else inhabit their body. And that's not really what I'm referencing in my own experience of it. But it was allowing myself to be connected to my own source of energy and allow that gift to transmit to others. And it was so cool, and it freaked me out because I was like the PowerPoint kind of girl who was very scripted and dotted my I's and crossed my T's with everything that I did. And now having that, I was like, well, what is that and what could that mean? And that planted the seed for me of looking that in life, I really find you can create from two ways. Linear reality, which is the way that most of us are inherited, A plus B equals C, right? If we want to get more clients, we, go drum up some more leads, we get on the phones, we make all the calls, whatever it is, or things show up. Or the other way, which is you operate in alignment, you co-create in what I call the world of what you don't know that you don't know, that shows up. And then the secret menu of like, oh, aligned clients just show up, or you and I connect, or whatever happens. And it's how I've learned to fill 6 and 7 figure programs is just, off a Facebook post or off of this, of aligned energy. So the first step is get in radical relationship with how you want to create. So if you're clear, you've spent a lot of your life putting in the hours, trading time for dollars, doing it that way in linear reality, nothing wrong with that way. But you're also like, the results are predictable or maybe in the realm of possible, but you're like, I want wild like stuff that couldn't even occur, like the Forbes thing, like starting the first podcast on Forbes under 30, like where did that come out of from? And like writing for them, I had no journalism experience. So that's like the game, right? That you want to play for yourself. Then you have to say, okay, well, what does it require to create and live life that way? And I found for myself, in order to do that, you have to be in a collaboration or a co-creationship with that energy, which means you hold the premise, I hold the premise that we all are a vessel, we're physical bodies that have access to our divine intelligence, our source, our consciousness, however you want to relate to it. And you have to learn, how do you create the conditions? Like after that event in Italy, I was like, how do I do that again? Right? How do you learn to tell your body it's okay to hold more of your energy, hold more of your gifts, so that your nervous system doesn't get jacked and you manifest an illness or some freak thing happens? But how do you hold that in your system? And then how do you direct it and trust it so you can learn to bring it into your gifts? And that is how I've been able, not only in a spoken word setting, do intuitive business launches. It's how I landed like a multiple 7 figure consulting contract on a ride back from Burning Man last year. I was like calling this thing in, but you learn the steps of how to do it. And so I think if I sum it up, it's A, ask yourself what game you're playing. Am I playing a linear game or a nonlinear game? And B, can I recognize that it's not about getting the right words, but more, if I'm an instrument, how do I learn about this instrument so much that I can understand the conditions my unique instrument needs to thrive? And then how do I be okay with running more energy through the instrument and then being able to successfully channel it out into various forms? And when you do that, life becomes improv. And it's how, as you said in the intro, I have, $5 million worth of real estate, all these different things very quickly. Because once you've got that circuitry system, it's like, I don't know, a little rainbow shining Care Bear. You can like direct it in any area of your life and watch what shows up. So huge concept, trying to break it down.
Yes.
But
Huge
yeah.
concept. We're just saying like, yeah, it's super easy. Would you say that like meditation, because I know that like I work with you and we do a lot of guided visualization, like I love everything you're saying, but like, how do I then tap into that? Right? Do I go sit and meditate for 6 hours? Do I, guided visualization?
Yeah, totally. Well, what I can say is I'm literally putting together a whole meditation track, and when it's done, you should all listen to it. But Dr. Joe Dispenza's work has been very influential on my journey as well. And I think it's a part of both of it. You know, the way that I see it is if you look at energy, then Hertz's law of energy, every emotion has a frequency, and this has been measured by science, and gratitude is at the top of frequency, and shame is the lowest vibration at the bottom. But beyond the frequency has different energy waves. And so if you think about matter, things move very slow. So the waves are thick and they're long. And when you think about like the speed of light, it's like very fast and very quick. So if you go to what I call the field, or you access states of consciousness, waking or in meditation, where you have an elevated high vibe emotion, meeting, a nice relaxed state, from that place, you can create what you want there, give yourself the experience of having it. And then when you bring it into this world here, it's already occurred. So it's much faster to go up there and bring it here versus creating in matter, which inherently takes a lot more time. So we could totally do a little experience if we wanted to. But if you know that as a premise, I would say as a quick exercise, give yourself the ability to presence an elevated emotion in your body, feel the already haveness of an experience. So, for example, I was feeling into a moment of like actually having my kids and this family, and like I was in this white dress and you could smell all the senses. And this isn't about being so specific, but it's having the felt sensory experience with all five senses. And then when you open yourself back up to life, consider you've already sent that menu in, you've ordered it from the universe's restaurant, and there's nothing else for you to do other than keep coming back to the feeling of the experience of having it. And definitely meditation in certain states are really easy to do, but as a practice, elevated emotion plus the feeling of a vision that you want and just allowing the lack of attachment will show up with more of that into your life consistently.
I love it. I'm super excited for the meditations. And Joe Dispenza has been really, really this past year for me a game changer. Um, all right. What is the biggest challenge that you've ever faced during this journey of entrepreneurship?
Yeah. Well, in the spirit of all this energy, what I've realized is playing a big game, the degree of success that you can hold, you also got to be willing to hold that equal and opposite degree of, if you want to call it failure, but energy is energy. It's got both sides of it. So, for me, it's shown up like really intense autoimmune. I had in 2020, I had built this multiple seven-figure coaching business and literally was about to do this event for 500 people on a cruise ship. And then it was COVID and it was like cruise ships in Italy and overnight $2 million worth of revenue just gone and 6 months worth of work gone. And I think it was the first time my body just actually was like, wow, we're going to take a pause. And it felt like someone literally turned the light switch off in me. My energy and vitality, like I just was like depressed and nothing changed. And that was the craziest part. I didn't have any thoughts about the experience. It was just like my body like ached. And as time went on, I had all this chronic inflammation and pain in my joints. And it became really hard to go from my upstairs bedroom to my downstairs kitchen. And like the more meditation and healthy eating I was doing was not helping. It was like a moment that all the tools that I had gotten at a certain point in my life were not the tools that were going to take me to the next step. And finally, I interviewed this woman on my podcast who was a naturopath for the British royal family. And I said, hey, like, you're an intuitive, like, you have a couple minutes, you can tell me what's happening. So it was such a mind mess. I couldn't understand what was going on. And she tells me about this thing called reactivated Epstein-Barr. And she's like, I'll run the labs for you if you want, just as a gift for having me on your show. And she did. And I had high levels of reactivated Epstein-Barr, which basically turns into MS if you don't put it back to sleep, along with rheumatoid arthritis, fibromyalgia, and so many other different chronic things. Epstein-Barr is at the core of it, which if you've ever had mono as a kid, Epstein-Barr lives in your system. It goes dormant, and certain things like black mold was what it was for me, can reactivate it. And you won't know. And someone's like, oh, you have MS or you have this. But the core issue is actually Epstein-Barr is reactivated and you got to put that baby back to sleep. So it was really challenging. And I got to this point where I was in so much physical pain. My brain chemistry was so tanked by this autoimmune. I was like, if this is life, like, I don't know if I'm into it. And I felt so profoundly complete. And it almost was like my second death, if you will, where I had to accept if I never did a podcast, if I never ran a retreat, like if I never wrote another song, like could I be 100% okay being okay? And it was like this Greek mythology, this goddess of Ananda, this story where she's like the goddess of heaven and her sister of the underworld brings her back down. And she's like, sister, come visit. And she's so jealous of her sister who has all this light. She kills her sister and puts her on a meat hook for display. And this beautiful goddess and all of her light and all of her power can't go back up to heaven. She just has to sit suspended on this meat hook in hell, like in this limbo. And she fights it and fights it. And the irony is when she finally accepts she's just on the meat hook dying and just to be dead, then she gets to come back up to heaven, but touched with the amount of depth she's been able to access and forever changed, now having alchemized that. And it felt like such this moment. I was like fighting and fighting and fighting this deeper transformation inside of me. But the thing was, is I had all this light, is how I equated it to for my near death and so much of the external success that I hadn't really alchemized and just been okay with like, who am I just as a being and as a human? And is there another way that I can run all this energy in me? And what I started to focus on was what micro hits of joy. If it wasn't about chasing, the accolade or the next event or the next big Grammy or whatever it was, right? If it wasn't about that, what could just give me that compounding feeling of joy? Like, what could my life be for if my life wasn't for all these gains? And in those compounding moments, the irony was I got my body out of fight or flight and I slowly started to heal and my brain chemistry came back on. But for a good year there, like it was the deepest, darkest kind of feelings. And I actually think a lot of us, in some ways, I'm grateful that I had that concentrated time to feel it because a lot of us, I think we have these slow versions of this. And then if you're like me, we satisfy it with something else. We distract our energy and focus it to business if something in our personal life isn't happy, or we know something in our health needs our attention, but we distract it with, a great vacation or something else to take our attention off of it. But when you start really gaining that deeper wisdom of what's there and working with your life in that way, I find who you get to become on the other side is massive. And, case in point, post 2020, when I finally alchemized that, I'm like, all this space got cleared in my nervous system. It felt like a full flush. And it's like the law of expansion and contraction. That which you create space for has the space to fill. I'm like, what's next? And just the last few years, it's been wild to see the things that I've gotten to rebuild and the things that have come through from a very different place. And that is by being in the laws of both of those. So yeah, definitely not a stranger to the adversity and the challenge. And I think it's something that's so important to actually talk about because both of them are so symbiotic in my own experience.
What is the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Best piece of advice I've ever received. I received a lot of advice. I would say that the best piece of advice is honestly just keep going. Is so often we get stuck and we think we've hit the end. But if you are committed to the experience of excellence and mastery over the course of your lifetime, then the timeline of when you think you should have the relationship, should have the baby, should have the 6 or 7 figures, should have this become irrelevant. And so many times I've been just at the precipice and I'm like, it's not working. I failed. I've this, I've that. And those are like, it's like the next moment, that next breath. Can I hold the discomfort a little bit longer? That actually the thing that you want shows up. And so if I can say anything, be committed to the game over the course of your lifetime, not over the course of your time, and see what gets to show up in that process.
I love that. I love that. So what is next coming up for you and the unconventional life?
Yeah, so we are just filming. My sister just left. She is a incredibly talented circus performer who got into digital marketing in the pandemic. Brilliant copywriter. We just produced this course, Art of Experience, which you were actually a part of our very first beta round of it. We just filmed it. So I've had, the last 10 years of knowledge creating retreats and teaching others how to use retreats as part of their business model, creating 6, 7 figures or whatever you want to do with them. So we're launching that in a public way coming up in the next couple months. So stay tuned for that. And then I've got this big meditation album that I've been working on, which is like, talk about all the conversation we've been having. It's like going deep in the fields of that. And you're going to get to demo it in our upcoming program, The Channel, some of those meditations. We're going to be doing live there, which is great. And we've got our signature events. We do these 5-day life and business accelerators and exotic locations all over the world. So we're taking over this beautiful place in the Himalayas in December for a group of about 50 or so. And we are just about to publicly go live with that. So maybe by the time some of you hear it, we'll be live with that. So check that out at unconventionallifeshow.com/Nepal if you want to join us there and all the fun things and hopefully becoming a mom. So,
Yeah. So how can, what's the best way for the audience to find you?
Yeah. So if you're into podcasts, we have almost 400 podcast episodes at Unconventional Life. Just put Unconventional Life into Google and to Spotify. You'll find all the stuff there. Jules Schroeder, Schroeder. Throw my name into Google. I've got plenty of music. I'm working on an album right now with some incredible producers in Nashville. We're going to release the first single in September. So if music's your thing, then check that out. And unconventionallifeshow.com. Grab on our email list. We do all kinds of free challenges, and there's all cool resources and goodies for you to aid on your journey. So
Amazing. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your gifts with everyone.
Tara, thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. We'll see you soon. Thank you for listening to this episode of Divine Lifestyles Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review us wherever you get your episodes. If you really loved this episode, screenshot it and share it on social media. It will help us to continue to make an impact. With gratitude and love always, keep illuminating your path.